Hey, I'm T.A. Charlie, and welcome to the Road to Concord with Professor Joe Bakanovic. Homeroom is on Rumble. You just go to Rumble and search the channels for the Road to Concord. It's one word. When you find it, you go ahead and you click follow. It might mean you got to set up an account, but it's fast, it's easy, it's free. I did it, you can do it. For those technologically challenged members of the class, you can also catch us on Facebook and YouTube. After the show, it's uploaded to Podbean, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and BitChute. Just look for The Road to Concord. You can go to the blog page, that's theroadtoconcord.com. That's where you'll find all your show notes, study notes, and handouts for the class. The phone is working. If you don't know how to call in, email us and we'll think about it. Finally, you can email a professor at joe@theroadtoconcord.com. He's a little slow, but he'll eventually get around to emailing you back. This show is currently mainly listener-sponsored. If you are interested in advertising your business on the show, please email us. With that said, we ask for your participation on a value-for-value basis. If you find our show of value to you, then you provide an equivalent portion of your labor and treasure through the donate link on the Road to Concord blog page, the show description on Rumble, and in the comments on the other streams. And thank you to all of you who have and will support this show. Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. Yep. I'm not Joe Bakanovic, and we don't have AI today. So I put a little comment in Rumble. The rest of you probably couldn't see it. And since I'm flying solo today, I won't be able to, get in there and do a bunch of commenting. I will try to check the board periodically if you do have questions. I'm here all by myself. I'm all alone, so this could be bad. So we'll see how things go. But glad you're here, and hope that we can have something here that'll help you out today. And before we get into the actual, I just want to talk just briefly because over the past day or so, had some challenges here dealing with different individuals, and it's important for us to be grounded in Yahweh. So important. In fact, I'm working on my next message. I'm going to be giving it at our local congregation, and its topic is going to be about believing loyalty. It's a phrase that Michael Heiser coined. At least he's the one that I picked it up from. And it talks about how, we have this big, apparent conflict in Scripture between grace, saved by grace only, and saved by works. And, and they look like they're at two ends of the spectrum, and there's nowhere in between. It's either one or the other. And so he's talking about this from the position of believing loyalty. In other words, if you're loyal to Yahweh, you're going to want to basically do what he asks you to do. It's a relationship thing, and it's that way because you're in a relationship. It's a loving father-son relationship, if you will. Some people would say it's a king-servant relationship. That kind of applies too, depending on how you're looking at it. But that's the idea. And when we stray away from that, that's when we get into trouble. And and on this show we've talked about what we believe as far as the divine council worldview and fallen angels and demons and things like that. I've come to believe they're real. I've actually experienced some of that, and that can be very, very dangerous. So just
just thought I'd just share that little tidbit with you. It's just something that I'm working through here, and just thought I'd share that before we get into what we're doing today. I don't know how far we're going to get today, but the text of the next few chapters, we're hoping to get 39 through maybe even 41 today. We may get 3 chapters in today. We'll see how it goes, because it's pretty much just a story narrative. I mean, I'm not saying it's, nothing important in there. We'll talk about a few points, but mostly it's just a narrative of the story of what's going on with Joseph as he comes into Egypt and such. And some of this is more important as we go forward. When we get into 42 and beyond, some of this will be echoing back to some of these things, perhaps in these chapters. But these pretty much are pretty straightforward in the narrative here, other than just a few little points that I'll go through. So we're just going to jump in here and start reading. And like I said, I'll talk about a few points, but pretty much we're just going to be reading through here and enjoying this story and seeing how Yahweh works. Let me try this way. It'll make it a little bigger for you, and hopefully I can do this so that we can keep the text on screen that we're reading from. If not, I'll just bump myself out of studio, or well, at least out of the screen. If I bump out of studio, you won't be able to hear me. But anyway, so here we are in 39, and of course the translator's little just heading here is Joseph's success in Egypt. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here. And in chapter 39, we begin in verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And I highlighted this part about Ishmaelites because if you remember back from the previous chapters, it was kind of interesting because the author of Genesis was talking about 2 different people groups in this regard as to who he was actually sold to. Because in one part of the chapter, it talked about them being Midianites. And then another part of the chapter talked about them being Ishmaelites. And it kind of went back and forth. And here we're back to Ishmaelites. And there is a distinction between these 2 people groups, but they, like I believe Joe also mentioned when he was covering that part, there was some intermarriage and mixing between them. So that could be why we're seeing this mixture of these 2 people groups as it's talking about here. How important that is to things, who knows, but it's just interesting to highlight these little tidbits that you see as you go along, that perhaps later on we may find something important going on here. And and Yahweh was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. Now his master saw that Yahweh was with him, and how Yahweh caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. And let me move this up here a little bit. So Joseph found favor in the sight, in his sight, and became his personal servant. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he owned he put in his charge. So this guy said, hey, this guy's very trustworthy, and I'm going to let him have everything. And it came about from that time he made him overseer in his house over all that he owned, and Yahweh blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. Thus Yahweh's blessing was upon all he owned in the house and in the field. And here's the important part here. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, and with him there was not concern. He did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. So basically he just turned everything over to Joseph and said, you just take care of everything. I'm just going to sit back, relax, and enjoy myself. So that's how much trust and faith he had put into Joseph. And it appears that, at least from the text, it doesn't give detail, but that Yahweh blessed Potiphar's home and all that he did, and he acknowledged that blessing. So he saw that there was something going on with Joseph. He was something special here. And here we have, now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. So apparently he was a pretty good looking guy. And it came about after these events that his master's wife looked with desire at Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, with me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house, and he has put all that he owns in my charge. And there is nothing in the house, nothing in his house. Let me try this again. There is no one greater in this house than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How could I do this great evil and sin against God or Elohim?" So, Joseph's saying, "Hey, I'm in charge of everything here, and you're the only thing he's, kept from me. And how can I do this? This would be a great sin." So, but she didn't let up. It says here, as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he did not listen to her to lie beside her or be with her. And then here's the important part here. Now it happened one day that he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household was there inside. So they were alone together here. And she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and went outside. So he just took off and went. And so we don't know. It doesn't say whether this was just his outer garment or what. There is a possibility he was even fleeing naked. It doesn't say, but there's, this could have just been an outer garment too. We're not told. Now, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called to the men of the household and said to them, "See, he has brought in a Hebrew to us to make sport of us." And we're going to come back to this here. "He then came in to me to lie with me, and I screamed. When he heard that I had raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled and went outside. So she left his garment beside her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with these words, 'The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came in to me to make sport of me.'" Again, there's that idea here, and we'll talk about that in a second. "And I raised my voice and screamed, and he left his garment beside me and fled outside." So, of course, she's bearing false witness here, and she's been, doing her best to manipulate Joseph here. But let's talk about this for a second, because this is where it's important. This idea here of to make sport of is the way they translated it here. This is tzachak. And if you remember a few chapters back, this was important because this was, when Abraham and Sarah, were told about them having a son in their old age, they both laughed, according to this, that's the way they translated it there. And then later on with Isaac and Esau, there was this word used again. And so you see here, there's a lot of different definitions to this. It says here at the beginning, just, to laugh, to mock, to play, or to jest. In some cases, like the case here in the, if I can get my mouse working here, the case here with Potiphar's wife, it had sexual connotations here. And that's why there are some scholars, I'm looking to see if there's any other things down in the lexicon here that would be helpful here. But there are some scholars that believe that the instance between Isaac and Ishmael was could have had some sexual connotations as well. We don't know, or it could have just been a scornful, mocking kind of thing as well. We do suspect, from the text, it's pretty clear that this was a dispute over the birthright, and that's clear in other parts of the thing. But I just wanted to highlight that. That's just one of those. Like I said, there's a few interesting points in this as we go along. I just noticed that comment from Delta Rose there. Oh my goodness. All right, so we continue on, and of course the master is not happy here. And now when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, "This is what your slave did to me," his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him in jail, the place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in jail. So he's lucky that he was just put in jail, because in many places this kind of thing could have been punishable by death, and maybe he was just awaiting sentence here. The scriptures are not does not include that. It's silent on that message, but he wasn't imprisoned here. But Yahweh was with Joseph, extended kindness to him, and gave him favor in the sight of the jailer. And here it goes again. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's charge all the prisoners who were in the jail, so that whatever was done, he was responsible for it. So again, he was put in charge of everything, and the chief jailer just was kicking back and relaxing and just letting Joseph, take care of everything. So you see this theme kind of repeating here. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because Yahweh was with him, and whatever he did, Yahweh made to prosper. So you see, again, the theme of this, that Yahweh is blessing Joseph here in his exile here to Egypt that was perpetrated by his brothers. And see, we're already into chapter 40, so we're going to be doing pretty well. I think we'll definitely make it through 41. We might even, if we get to that point, we'll see what's going on from there, because I didn't prepare anything past that. But then as we go on here into chapter 40, again, this is while Joseph is imprisoned here, and this is where this part of the story picks up. Then it came about after these things, the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was furious with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, in the jail, the same place where Joseph was imprisoned. So these guys were kind of cellmates, if you will. The captain of the bodyguard put Joseph in charge of them, and he took care of them, and they were in confinement for some time. It just, we don't know how long this took, but apparently it was a prolonged period of time. Then the cupbearer and the baker for the king of Egypt, who were confined in jail, both had a dream the same night, each man with his own dream, and each dream with its own interpretation. And when Joseph came to them in the morning and observed them, behold, they were dejected. Their countenance was fallen there. And Joseph noticed this. He asked Pharaoh's officials who were in, let's try that again. He asked Pharaoh's officials who were with him in confinement in his master's house, "Why are your faces so sad today?" And they said to him, "We have had a dream, and there's no one to interpret it." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to Elohim? Tell it to me, please." So here we're seeing that dreams were important, and in the Egyptian culture, apparently they were very much into their dreams being interpreted to see if there's some type of omen to these things, and so they were looking for someone to interpret it. And to Joseph's credit here, it's interesting that Joseph doesn't say, "Tell me your dream, I'll interpret it." He says here, "Do not interpretations belong to Elohim?" So Joseph is kind of indicating here that he's got a direct line to Elohim here, is kind of what he's saying. So tell me your dream, and I'll get with Elohim and give you the interpretation. So we'll see what happens as we pick up the story in verse 9. So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream, behold, there was a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches, and as it was budding, its blossoms came out, and its clusters produced ripe grapes. Now Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, so I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I put the cup into Pharaoh's hand." So this was the dream that the cupbearer had, and now we're going to see here, and I highlighted this in blue because this is a prophecy. It's a very near prophecy, but it shows here that Joseph was acting here in a prophetic role. He was interpreting this dream with the assistance of Yahweh, and what he tells these people here, we're going to find actually comes to pass. So that's one of the indications of a true prophet, that if they tell you something and it comes to pass, that's one of the indications you can look for to see if it's a true prophet. So then Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days, and 3 more days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you will put Pharaoh's cup into his hand according to your former custom when you were his cupbearer." So it's showing here that he's going to be, in 3 days, Pharaoh's going to come and, basically pardon him and bring him and put him back into his proper office, and he will serve Pharaoh again as he did in the past. Now, this is an important part here. And Joseph tells him, "Only keep me in mind when it goes well with you, and please do me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this house." My goodness, this is important, and we'll see how important this is later on. And this goes to the idea of gratitude. When someone does something, for you, it's a good thing to, perhaps repay with kindness, or, just acknowledge their kindness. And we'll see how well this goes as we continue in the story. And Joseph explains why he's asking for this. He says, "For I was, in fact, kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing that should have put me into the dungeon." So he's proclaiming his innocence and explaining, that he's there not of his own accord, and not, not by his own will. And he's pleading for mercy, basically, from Pharaoh. And now we turn to the chief baker. And the chief baker here, he was kind of encouraged by this. He's like, "Hey, cool. The cupbearer had his dream, and everything's good. And, ooh, good. Tell me my dream. I want to see what's going to happen now." Let's see what happens here in verse 16. When the chief baker saw that he had interpreted favorably, he said to Joseph, "I also saw in my dream, and behold, there were 3 baskets of white bread on my head. In the top basket, there were some of all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh, and the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." Then here's the rough part. Then Joseph answered and said, and again, this is a near prophecy. This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Again, 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and will hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off of you. So not such a good outcome for the baker. And then here we see, in verse 20, we see what happens. "Thus it came about on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all his servants, and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants, and restored the cupbearer to his office, and he put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker just as Joseph had interpreted to them." And then the sad part of this story, in verse 23, "Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him." So, and this is also a kind of, if you look at this throughout the Bible, this is one of Yahweh's themes about remembering. So you see this interjected into this story here, how many times we're commanded to remember the chesed, the loving kindness of Yahweh, and not forget it. And we see this kind of in this story. As Joe was saying, I think in the last class that we did on this, he was talking about how Joseph is a type, and there are similarities to some of the things that happened with him in relationship to Messiah and things like that. And some people take this even further in some of these accounts here, especially with the thing with Potiphar's wife, and talking about how, this is kind of mirroring some of the temptations that Yeshua went through in the desert, where the adversary was tempting him with power and lust and all these different things. Of course, he went through all those and that kind of thing. So just some more possible items that come into this type. Boy, we are going fast today, so this could be a short class, or we'll see what we do here, because we're already at chapter 41. I knew this was going to go quick for these chapters, but it's going even faster than I thought it was going to. So we'll see where we go from here, and if we have a short class, that's okay too. I'm sure you guys won't complain too much. But now we're jumping into chapter 41. Now it happened at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream, and behold, he was standing by the Nile. So, talking about this cupbearer forgetting, he forgot that this is 2 years later, So we don't even know how long Joseph was in this prison, because he, it said earlier that, he was in there some time before even the baker and the cupbearer came into the prison. So there was a period of time there, and now 2 more years have come to pass here. So there's some significant time periods going on here. And here's Pharaoh's dream in verse 2. And lo, from the Nile there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed in the marsh grass. And then behold, 7 other cows came up after them from the Nile, ugly and gaunt, and they stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. The ugly and gaunt cows ate up the 7 sleek and fat cows. Then Pharaoh awoke. So here's the first part of the dream. So there's these cows that, there's 7 of them. They come up from the Nile, and they're all nice and fat and just wonderful looking, those that you love to have slaughtered and, have a barbecue with. And then after that, 7 that were ugly and kind of just, not very well fed, they came up, and it shows that the ugly and gaunt cows ate up the fat cows. So pretty dramatic what's going on here in this dream. And then, of course, Pharaoh awoke, and I guess it was kind of surprising to him. And then he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain came up on a stalk, plump and good. Again, very, very good and tasty and looking yummy. Then behold, 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind, and sprouted up after them. So the east wind, that's usually a dry and harsh wind that usually indicates drought and such. And again, the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump and full ears. And then again, Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So these dreams were, again, significant to Pharaoh. And, he's troubled by this. So he's looking for someone to interpret these dreams for him. Again, it seems in the Egyptian culture, that was a pretty common thing to look for interpretations of dreams because they, you know, they were polytheistic and such, and probably had a lot of the word is escaping me. A lot of different ideas of how these things can affect them. Very superstitious. That's the word I was looking for. So let's pick up again in verse 8. Now in the morning his spirit was troubled, so he sent and called all the magicians of Egypt and all his wise men. And Pharaoh told him his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them to Pharaoh. And so what we're going to do here, it's just about break time, and this is a good point, I think, to take a break, and then we'll get into somebody remembering Joseph. And if I can get to, I'm flying solo today, so I'm running everything by myself, so it takes me a second to move around my mouse. But we're going to take a 3-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll finish up chapter 41, and then we'll see where we're going from there. So here we go. All right, welcome back, and we'll jump right back in here, and we'll see what's going on in verse 9. There we go. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying, "I would make mention today of my own offenses." So he's starting to feel a little guilty here, which, he should be. Pharaoh was furious with his servants, and he put me in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, both me and the chief baker. And we had a dream on the same night. he and I, and each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. So he's recounting this story that happened here in the prison. Now, a Hebrew youth was there, a servant of the captain of the bodyguard. And this is interesting that he calls him a youth. So, you know, we, like I said, we don't know what the time periods were here, but Joseph was still a fairly young man here. I don't, he was probably a young man, maybe late teens, early 20s, perhaps. We don't know exactly. Like I said, it's not clear, but just an interesting point there. And we related them to him, related the dreams to him. And he interpreted our dreams for us. To each one he interpreted according to his own dream. And just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me in my office, but he hanged him. So he's again recounting here and showing that this prophecy or this interpretation of the dreams came about. So, of course, Pharaoh's interested in this. And in verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And when they had shaved him and changed his clothes, he came to Pharaoh. So, you're coming before Pharaoh, so they had to clean him up and everything and get him all gussied up, if you will, to go see Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, but no one can interpret it. And I have heard it said about you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And here's Joseph's reply again. Joseph then answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me, God or Elohim will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. So again, to Joseph's credit, he's giving credit to Yahweh here. So Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, in my dream, behold, I was standing on the bank of the Nile, and behold, 7 cows, fat and sleek, came up out of the Nile, and they grazed in the marsh grass. Lo, 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and gaunt, such as I had never seen for ugliness in all the land of Egypt. So they were pretty emaciated. And then the lean and ugly cows ate up the first 7 fat cows. Yet when they had devoured them, it could not be detected that they had devoured them, for they were just as ugly as before. And then I awoke. So it's interesting, for whatever reason, the author here in Genesis gives us a few additional facts here about this dream in this second account. And just a little administrative note, it's raining pretty hard here, and I am on a wireless internet connection here, so it's possible that I may have some internet issues going forward. I did reboot my modem this morning, but we'll see, because we are still under a tropical storm watch here in the Panhandle. So just a little note there in case we have some issues here. All right, so Pharaoh awoke, and then I also saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears, full and good, came up on a single stalk, and lo, 7 ears withered, thin, and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them. Again, that harsh, dry wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. Then I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. And then again here we have Joseph prophetically interpreting Pharaoh's dream here. In verse 25, now Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dreams are one and the same. God has told, or Elohim has told to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one and the same. 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 thin ears scorched by the east wind will be 7 years of famine. And as it is spoken to Pharaoh, God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. Behold, 7 years of great abundance are coming in all the land of Egypt. And after them, 7 years of famine will come, and all the abundance will be forgotten, in the land of Egypt, and the famine will ravage the land. So the abundance will be unknown in the land because of the subsequent famine, for it will be very severe. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is determined by Elohim, and Elohim will quickly bring it about. Now let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. So this is, Joseph, again, he's giving credit to Elohim, to Yahweh, and he's interpreting this dream to Pharaoh and showing him what Yahweh's about to do here in the land of Egypt. And as we move forward, see these, we're kind of going quickly through these chapters here, but these chapters are laying the foundation and groundwork for what's about to happen going forward with Israel and everything there. So we're laying that foundation here. And let Pharaoh take action to appoint overseers in charge of the land, and let him exact a fifth of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 years of abundance. So they're taking 20% of this produce and setting it aside. And then let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up the grain for food in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, and let them guard it. And let the food become as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine, which will occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land will not perish during the famine. And now the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his servants. So Joseph's kind of now in more of an advisory role to Pharaoh, and telling him, if you do these things and you do it like this, you guys will be able to survive this famine and do well. So, of course, here we see what ends up happening. In verse 38, then Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is a divine spirit? So, they may not actually follow Yahweh, because they're dealing with a pantheon of gods, but they acknowledge that he's got some connection here with at least some God that, is giving him some wisdom that they don't have. So they recognize this. And so Pharaoh said to Joseph, since Elohim has informed you of all this, there is no one so discerning and wise as you are. So he's acknowledging, he knows that Joseph's got this connection. He's got the main line to the main man here. He can pick up that phone and talk to the main man here is the way they're kind of looking at this, kind of putting it in today's terms. So here we go in verse 40 again. You see this continuing theme going on here. You shall be over my house, and according to your command will all my people according to your command, all my people shall do homage. Only in the throne I will be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. And then here's a very significant part here in verse 42. Then Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in the garments of fine linen, and put a gold necklace around his neck. So this is very important, because that signet ring meant that with Joseph having that signet ring in his possession, he could basically sign documents for Pharaoh. In other words, if he signed that document and he sealed it with that signet ring, it was as if Pharaoh himself had signed and issued that document. So this is a big deal. He's giving basically all of his authority to Joseph. Again, just like the other previous examples here of Potiphar and the head jailer, he's giving all authority to Joseph, in acknowledging that he's got this connection with Elohim, and that he's got it all together, and he's not even caring about. He's letting him take care of it. He's kicking back and relaxing and letting Joseph take care of everything. So this is very significant. And then, of course, it goes on in some more honorifics here in verse 43. He had him ride in his second chariot, and they proclaimed before him, bow the knee, and he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission, no one shall raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Again, so he's reiterating the fact that he's turning everything over to Joseph. People can't do anything without Joseph's approval. So this is very, very significant. And then Pharaoh named Joseph Zapheth-Paneah, and he gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, as his wife. And Joseph went forth over the land of Egypt. So we see here, Joseph is, he's second in command of all Egypt now. And in many aspects, he's really the one in charge. Pharaoh's kind of turned it all over to him, and he's not really, worrying about anything. He's just like, Joseph, you take care of everything. I'm going to kick back here and enjoy myself and let you take care of everything. So very significant things going on here. And then as we conclude here, in verse 46, now Joseph was 30 years old. Oh, so now we actually have an age. He was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So he was a little bit older than I was thinking. I forgot that they had actually put this age here in here. But still, he's considered a young man when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. So he's out surveying everything now. And during the 7 years of plenty, the land brought forth abundantly. So he gathered all the food of these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt and placed the food in the cities. And he placed in every city the food from its surrounding fields. Thus Joseph stored up the grain in great abundance like the sand of the sea until he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. So there was a lot of grain that was stored within these cities, and it was distributed throughout all the cities. So he didn't just put it in one place. It was very wise of him to have it dispersed so that later on, when distribution time came, it was easier to distribute as well. And it was also easier because the surrounding fields of these cities, they just took it from the fields to the city. There wasn't a lot of transportation involved and things like that. So very wise in the way he put all this together. And now we talk about the family of Joseph here. And in verse 50, now before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph from Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, or Manasseh in the English, for he said, God made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. So that's what Manasseh means, is to forget. So we see the meanings of the names had significance here. And then he named the second Ephraim, and for he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. And again, Ephraim means to be made fruitful. So we see the meanings behind these names as we go forward. And when the 7 years of plenty which had been in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said, then there was famine in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. So this is again part of this fulfillment of the prophecies that Joseph made, and also the effects of his stewardship over Egypt in preparing for this according to the directions of Yahweh. And in verse 55, so when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph, whatever he says to you, you shall do. So again, even when they came to Pharaoh, he's like, don't talk to me about this. Go talk to Joseph. He's in charge of all this. You do whatever he tells you. So again, he's just putting everything on Joseph here. When the famine was spread over all the face of the earth, so this is perhaps a little bit of a hyperbole, but it was the famine didn't just affect Egypt, it affected the surrounding lands. And we'll find that out as we move into the next few chapters here. So this is significant. Then Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, and the famine was severe in all the land of Egypt. And the people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the earth. So people were coming not just from Egypt, but from the surrounding areas as well. And if I can get my mouse where it needs to be, there we go. It's so much easier when you have other people helping you on here, but when you're flying solo. In fact, we've got somebody on Twitch I need to snipe, but I'll do that when I get done here. But we made it here, and it ended up being pretty good here. The last chapter was a little bit longer, so it took a little bit more time, but we did make it through all 3 of those chapters. And like I said, these chapters are just laying the groundwork for what's about to take place as we go forward into where Joseph actually becomes a redeemer for Israel and for his brethren and such. And it's interesting to see, Joseph is a character here that he seems to have had some pretty close relationship with Yahweh. He gives credit to Yahweh. You see that over and over again here. You see where Yahweh blesses him, and he ends up being, even though he was put in this circumstance, it looks like a negative circumstance where he was, taken as a slave, and then he was thrown into prison. But eventually Yahweh brings him out of all these persecutions, if you will, and makes him, like we talked about, he's second in charge of all Egypt, and eventually becomes a redeemer of his brethren from the famine. And we see later on, this story continues to go on, and eventually, unfortunately, as they forget Joseph and they forget Pharaoh, the Pharaoh that knew Joseph dies off, and then the tables kind of turn on Israel there in Egypt, and they end up becoming in bondage, and so the story goes. So we see how this is laying the groundwork for all those future parts of the story to come along. So while we went through several chapters here, they are important in that they are laying the framework and the groundwork for what Yahweh's about to do. We see all this kind of building to a climax, and then we get to the Exodus and where Yahweh again redeems Israel again and brings them out of bondage and such. So you see this continual story, and you see Yahweh's hand throughout here. So I think it's very good. Well, like we said, that's why we're doing this study in Genesis, because it telegraphs throughout not just the rest of Genesis, but even the rest of the entire Bible, because it builds that framework on which a lot of the later prophecies are built. So I appreciate it. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, let me just throw up a couple of these comments. Deltro says, it seems Yahweh gave Joseph great wisdom. Yes, he did. And the thing that I liked as we were going through there is how Joseph was giving that credit to Yahweh. He was not saying, I'm not interpreting these dreams. This is coming from Yahweh, not me. I'm just the messenger here. And so that shows his humility and his appreciation to Yahweh as that believing loyalty that we talked about. And we'll see this another comment from Deltros here. Yahweh did a lot to reunite Joseph with his family. And we see how we see the hand of Yahweh, even though there were these things that, in the short term looked negative, they ended up blessing Joseph and his family in turn. So it kind of gives you another way of looking at your life, perhaps. And when you are facing difficult times, that sometimes, we go through these periods of difficulty and persecution, perhaps even, or just difficulties. But many times they turn out to be blessings, especially when you look back at them and you say, now I see what Yahweh was doing back there. At the time it was like, oh, this is horrible, and what's Yahweh doing? But then as you look back, you say, oh, now I see what Yahweh's been doing. And so this is kind of a place where we can look at those lessons from the scriptures and maybe look at those and apply them in our lives. So with that, we'll wrap up here. And let's see, tomorrow, I don't know what Joe's doing tomorrow. I believe what he's going to be doing, since we just finished our study there in Jeremiah, he's looking at starting into the New Testament. And so I think what he's probably going to be doing on that day is he's going to just kind of maybe do an introduction to the New Testament, perhaps. That sounds like what he's going to do. He does owe me a calendar class, and that may end up being what he does, possibly even Thursday, perhaps, because I don't think he has anything directly on there. I know he's working on that, but I don't know if he's got it done yet. And with him being away visiting family, I don't know how much time he'll have to devote to that. So that might get put off a little bit longer too. We'll see what happens. And then Friday, of course, we'll be back into Judah's scepter and Joseph's birthright and continue that study. But just as an administrative note, though, because we are coming, it's kind of interesting how all these things are working out for us. Even all these studies are kind of closing up kind of at the same time. We're getting close to being done with Genesis. We've only got maybe another month or so, perhaps maybe a little bit longer. We'll be done with Genesis. We're coming to the end of Judah's scepter and Joseph's birthright. We just finished Jeremiah. So all these things that we've had on our plate are coming to a conclusion. So we're looking forward to what we're going to be doing with the show going forward. And we solicit input from the class, from the audience. If there's something specific you would like us to cover, please, send us an email, admin at We Who Are Lost, or Joe at theroadtoconcord.com. I forgot to put that up on my thing today. Sorry about that. You can also put it in the comments, but don't do that today because, like I said, I'm flying solo today. So please send it in an email and just let us know if there's certain things you'd like us to cover, topics you'd like to see, or, maybe which books of the New Testament you'd like us to cover, those kind of things. Just anything so that we can better serve you. And with that, I think we're pretty much done. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And Joe will be back in studio tomorrow, should be, I hope, or we're in real trouble. And our AI is out, I think, until Friday. I don't know. I think she's heading back Friday, so she might not be in studio Friday. She may be in studio. She said she was taking her laptop with her, but it depends. She's visiting family, so whether she'll be able to visit with us or not, we don't know. We'll see how that worked out. But we do look forward to seeing you tomorrow and the rest of the week. And with that, I'll say my goodbyes and see if I can close this stream out. And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day.